Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis,
Yeah.
there's this really comforting expectation of just sheer precision,
Yeah,
right?
it's very clinical.
Exactly. It's like engineering. You
Right.
break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the radius bone, and the doctor just points at the film and says, well, there it is.
Right. It's completely binary, broken or not broken. You don't have to debate the philosophy of the fracture.
Right. It's clean. But then you step into the world of human connection, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just utterly useless.
Right.
We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky.
Which is terrifying when you consider the scale of what we're building.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the infrastructure we have right now, we are building the most sophisticated, omnipresent communication apparatus in the history of our species. I mean, if you are listening to this on a smartphone, you are holding a supercomputer that can instantly connect you to virtually anyone on the planet with, like, zero latency, high-definition video.
Anytime, anywhere.
Anytime. We are building these massive, glittering digital bridges. But so often, for so many people, it feels like we are building bridges to absolutely nowhere.
Which is really the defining paradox of our era, the connectivity paradox.
Yeah, why is it that the more connective technology we build, the lonelier we collectively become? You're listening to The Deep Dive, and today's mission is to unpack a stack of sources that are fascinating, complex, and honestly, deeply unsettling.
They really are.
We are digging into the modern state of human connection. We're going to be pulling from demographic research papers, mapping out global household structures, software development business plans from the people actually coding our social lives, and some really profound theoretical frameworks about the trajectory of communication itself.
And the scope of this is just massive.
Huge. We're going to explore the rise of the solo economy, how billion-dollar dating algorithms monetize the human search for love, the neurological mechanics of gamifying our behavior, and ultimately how artificial intelligence is structurally rewiring social interaction from the absolute ground up.
And I think what we really need to focus on today isn't just the fact that people are lonely. Loneliness is, well, it's the baseline symptom. The real investigation is into the underlying mechanism.
Right, how the machine actually works.
Exactly. We need to look at how the architecture of our technology is evolving, because it is evolving in very deliberate ways to either exploit that baseline loneliness or, in some of the more radical frameworks we'll discuss later, fundamentally alter what it even means to communicate with another entity.
It's shifting from a tool to an entity.
We have essentially crossed a threshold where technology is no longer just a tool we use to talk to each other. The technology itself is becoming the communication partner.
Okay, so before we get into the algorithms, the AI, and the business models, we have to start with the flesh and blood user, right? The person staring at the screen. We have to understand the demographic and psychological tectonic shifts driving this entire ecosystem.
Because you can't understand the product without understanding the consumer.
Right. And the default way human beings live is changing at a staggering pace. We're seeing the rise of what sociologists and economists are calling the solo economy. And the demographic data we pulled from Southeast Asia on this is just, well, it's a perfect microcosm of this global shift.
Yeah, the Southeast Asian data is critical here because we are looking at regions undergoing incredibly rapid urbanization and sudden economic alignment with Western individualism. The changes in household structures there aren't just shifting, they are snapping.
Snapping is a good word for it.
Look at the numbers out of Indonesia. The data shows that in 2018, there were about 2.01 million marriages. Just 5 years later, in 2023, that number had plummeted to 1.58 million.
Wait, that is nearly 500,000 fewer marriages in just a 5-year span?
Yes.
That is a massive structural vacuum in a society.
It is, and it's not a statistical anomaly related to like a single event. It is a steady, compounding year-over-year decline. We are seeing identical trend lines in major urban hubs like Jakarta, Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh City. Demographically, young people are delaying marriage by a decade or opting out of the institution entirely and choosing to live alone.
Wow.
Single-person households are now growing at a significantly faster rate than either small nuclear family households or large multi-generational ones.
Think about what that means for a second, just on a purely practical level. If you are sitting in a traffic jam in one of these cities, or even walking down the aisle of a grocery store, you are looking at an economy that has fundamentally pivoted from consumption centered on a family unit to consumption centered on an isolated individual.
It changes everything.
Right. It changes real estate, it changes food packaging, it changes changes urban planning, but more importantly for our discussion today, that physical isolation brings severe psychological consequences. And this is where the research from Emerald Publishing comes in.
The Emerald study is fascinating.
Yeah, they analyze how loneliness actually dictates consumer behavior.
Right.
They draw a hard line between two types of isolation, transient loneliness and chronic loneliness.
And that distinction is basically the Rosetta Stone for understanding the entire digital connection economy, because the psychological triggers are completely different. Transient loneliness is temporary. It's acute. It's the feeling you get when you've just moved to a new city for a job and you don't know anyone yet.
Or you had a bad falling out with your friend group.
Right, or you're just having an isolated, depressing weekend. The researchers found that transient loneliness induces a very specific cognitive state, a sudden loss of control over your social environment.
So you feel like you have no agency.
Exactly. And to cope with that perceived loss of agency, people engage in heavy variety-seeking behavior. They crave a multitude of choices to feel like they are back in the driver's seat of their own lives.
Okay, so let me try to ground this. If I'm hit by a sudden transient wave of loneliness on a Friday night, I might go to the grocery store and just buy 10 completely different flavors of ice cream. I'm not going to eat them all. I'm probably not even hungry.
Probably not.
But the physical act of having options, standing in the aisle, scanning the labels, picking out all these different pints and loading them into my cart, it acts as a psychological balm, right? It makes me feel like I have choices. I have agency. I am back in control.
I would actually push back on the ice cream analogy just a bit because while it perfectly illustrates the desire for control in transient loneliness, it completely falls apart when we look at the second category, chronic loneliness.
Oh, really? How so?
Because chronic loneliness isn't about a temporary loss of control. It is a persistent, long-term state of isolation. When someone is chronically lonely for years, the psychological damage goes deeper than agency. It erodes identity itself.
Man, that's heavy.
It is. Chronically lonely people feel invisible. They feel like they just don't matter. So according to the Emerald study, their variety-seeking behavior isn't driven by a need for control. It is driven by a desperate need for uniqueness and a desire for sensation-seeking.
So it's not about options anymore.
Right. They aren't looking for 10 flavors of vanilla to feel in control. They're looking for a high-stimulus jolt to break through the absolute numbness of their isolation.
Okay. I see the difference now. So if I'm chronically lonely, I'm not just buying 10 normal flavors. I am scouring specialty stores for the most obscure, limited edition, artisanal squid ink and habanero ice cream.
Exactly.
And I'm doing that just to feel like I am a special, unique person consuming a unique thing. Like I need an extreme sensory overload experience just to feel something, anything other than the baseline void.
Precisely. Now, I want you to map those two distinct psychological states, the desperate need for control and the desperate need for unique, high-sensory validation. Map those onto the digital world. Think about the architecture of a modern dating app.
Wow, yeah. It is essentially an infinite catalog of human faces.
It is the ultimate marketplace for a lonely, variety-seeking consumer. It provides the absolute illusion of infinite choice. For the transiently lonely user, the sheer mechanical ability to swipe left or right on 100 human beings in 60 seconds provides a massive, immediate injection of control.
You are the arbiter of your social reality.
Exactly. And for the chronically lonely user, the endless, exhausting search for that one elusive, unique match, or the sudden, high-sensory hit of your phone vibrating to tell you someone super liked you, that caters directly to their need for uniqueness and sensation.
That is so manipulative.
It is. The technology isn't just a matching service. It is a meticulously calibrated machine designed to absorb and monetize those exact psychological deficits.
Which brings up a fascinating and honestly slightly dark reality. If you have millions of people desperately seeking a feeling of control or uniqueness to cure their loneliness and you are a software developer, well, you aren't looking at a sociological tragedy. You are looking at a goldmine.
A massive one.
Yeah. How do you actually build a pipeline to extract revenue from that specific psychological state? We have this internal business plan document from Fulminous Software. They are a development consultancy that builds these kinds of platforms. And you listening right now, whatever you think these apps are making, double it. The sheer scale of the capital involved is staggering. Fulminous projects the global online dating market will hit $13.14 billion by 2030.
And we can ground that in their 2024 revenue figures just to show the current scale. Match Group pulled in $3.5 billion. Tinder alone generated $1.94 billion. Just to put that in perspective, Tinder's annual revenue is roughly equivalent to the entire gross domestic product of a small country like Belize.
That is insane for an app where you just flick pictures.
It is. Bumble sits at $866 million. Hinge at $550 million. Badoo, which dominates heavily outside the U.S., is at $205.3 million. A Cupid at $120 million. Coffee Meets Bagel at $36 million. These are not just matchmaking utilities. These are massive, self-sustaining digital economies.
But how are they actually extracting that wealth? Because the majority of users download these apps for free, right? Let's look at the friction points they introduced to get to that $13 billion projection. You have your baseline freemium model, where the core utility is free, but they create artificial bottlenecks that you have to pay to remove.
Right. Pay-to-play mechanics.
Yeah. Then you have pure subscription models, like eHarmony, which locks you behind a paywall from day one. But the real revenue engines, the real money makers, are the microtransactions. Tinder's Boosts, where you pay to have your profile shown to more people for 30 minutes. Or Coffee Meets Bagels, Beans.
Beans, yes.
You are literally converting fiat currency into digital tokens to buy temporary visibility in a crowded marketplace.
What the Fulminous plan highlights that is particularly interesting is how these monetization strategies shift depending on the geographic and cultural context of the solo economy. They note that the U.S. market strongly prefers paid memberships and flat-fee subscriptions.
Because we're used to Netflix and gym memberships.
Exactly. American users are culturally conditioned to pay a flat monthly fee for premium, frictionless access. In Europe, it's a more fragmented mix of free tiers with selective premium upgrades.
But in Asia, it's totally different, right? The document says the Asia market thrives almost entirely on freemium models that are heavily driven by small, continuous microtransactions and virtual gifting.
Yes, and that ties directly back to cultural consumption habits. In many Asian digital markets, there's a strong precedent set by mobile gaming and live streaming, where the continuous exchange of low-cost digital gifts is a normalized form of social interaction and status signaling. The architecture of the dating app's monetization simply adapts to whatever form of digital consumption the local solo economy is already comfortable with.
But hold on, let me push back on this entire premise. I've always struggled with the fundamental logic of this business model.
Okay, lay it on me.
If I start a company that sells, say, pest control, my goal is to eliminate your termites. If I do a great job, the termites are gone and you don't need me anymore. If a dating app is actually good at its job, if the algorithm works perfectly, it finds you a highly compatible partner, you fall in love, and you get married. What is the immediate next step? You delete the app.
Yes, you churn.
Right. You churn out of their revenue ecosystem entirely. So isn't it technically bad business to be successful? Doesn't their $13 billion projection depend entirely on the user staying lonely, staying variety-seeking, and continuously failing to find a mate?
That is the defining tension of the industry, absolutely, and the developers are acutely aware of it. The source text actually categorizes how different corporate entities navigate that exact paradox, and they do it in two entirely divergent ways. You have Hinge, for example, which has famously leaned directly into the paradox with their designed-to-be-deleted marketing strategy.
Right, which sounds like a terrible business plan on paper.
Yeah. But it's actually a calculated bet on high-value churn. Hinge positions itself as the premium serious relationship app. They are banking on the idea that if they actually facilitate a successful marriage, the word-of-mouth marketing generated by that success will bring in 3 new, highly motivated users willing to pay steep upfront subscription fees. They are monetizing the outcome.
High-value churn. I love that. What a flawlessly clinical corporate way to describe two human beings finding lifelong happiness.
It is entirely clinical, but then you look at the other side of the spectrum. Models like Badoo or Tinder, they do not monetize the outcome, they monetize the process of searching.
Because the search never ends.
Exactly. Their architecture relies heavily on continuous, endless loops of microtransactions. They sell you VIP visibility, profile boosts, and the ability to undo a mistaken swipe. Their entire financial model is predicated on maximizing the lifetime value of the user while they remain on the platform. For these apps, prolonged engagement keeping you on the treadmill is the core driver of revenue. They absolutely need to keep the user in that psychological state of transient or chronic variety seeking we discussed earlier.
Which introduces a massive design problem. If your entire GDP-sized business model relies on keeping users endlessly engaged on a treadmill, and you know they are psychologically hungry for variety, How do you stop them from just getting exhausted?
Because swiping gets boring.
Because eventually, even an infinite catalog of human faces gets incredibly tedious. Swiping left and right for an hour feels like doing data entry. How do they prevent fatigue? The answer, according to the developers at JPLoft, is gamification. They don't just present you with profiles, they take the deeply vulnerable search for human companionship and they map it onto the mechanics of a video game.
And the data JPLoft provides on this is staggering. They note that integrating aggressive gamification into a dating platform can increase user engagement metrics by up to 150%.
150%.
Yes. When you gamify the user experience, you are essentially bypassing the logical brain and directly hijacking the dopaminergic pathways to build habit-driven daily engagement loops.
You know, we used to compare this to a casino or a slot machine, but honestly, I think that analogy is a bit tired. A slot machine is purely random. What these apps are doing is much closer to our evolutionary biology. It's a digital foraging mechanism.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Human beings evolved to forage for scarce resources, berries in a forest or suitable mates in a small tribe. What these gamified apps do is create a synthetic forest where the berries, the potential matches, and the micro hits of validation are mathematically infinite but nutritionally empty. You keep foraging, you keep swiping, you keep getting little hits of dopamine, but you're fundamentally starving for real connection.
That is a much more accurate framework. It's an action-reward loop disguised as romance. And if you look at the specific psychological triggers JPLoft outlines, they are classic behavioral conditioning. They use points and reward systems. They use badges. You literally get a digital sticker that designates you a top matchmaker or a great conversation starter.
Like a Boy Scout badge for flirting.
Exactly. They implement daily streaks that psychologically punish you if you break your habit of logging in every single day.
They have progress levels.
Okay.
They have limited time boosts to create an entirely artificial sense of urgency. Some apps literally have leaderboards. And JPLoft notes that the integration cost for these features isn't cheap. A developer might spend anywhere from $10,000 to over $75,000 just to build these advanced gamification ecosystems into the app.
It's an investment.
They are spending the price of a luxury car just to ensure the button you press gives you the exact right chemical hit to keep you pressing it.
And it manifests in incredibly specific, stress-inducing ways. Look at Bumble's famous 24-hour reply timer. The moment you match, a countdown clock starts. It creates this intense localized panic. You have to message right now, or this potential future is permanently erased.
Which forces you back into the app.
Always. Or consider Happen, which utilizes background geolocation tracking to send you missed connection push notifications. You are just walking to get a coffee, and your phone buzzes to tell you that you just walked past a highly compatible user. It triggers an overwhelming sense of curiosity and FOMO, fear of missing out. It turns your actual physical commute into a gamified scavenger hunt.
And here is where it tips from clever design into something slightly terrifying. The gamification isn't static anymore. It's not just a set of rules applied to everyone equally. Artificial intelligence is now dynamically personalizing the game for you.
Exactly. The AI algorithms are running constant, real-time analyses on your specific interaction patterns. They measure your response times, they measure the micro-hesitations, like how many milliseconds you linger on a specific type of profile picture before swiping.
That's tracking milliseconds.
Milliseconds.
Sure.
The system then dynamically adapts the reward schedule based on your individual psychological profile. If the AI senses you are experiencing fatigue and are about to close the app, it will suddenly push a highly attractive, highly compatible profile to the top of your stack to give you a massive dopamine hit and pull you back in.
So it knows when you're about to quit.
It knows exactly when you're going to quit. It calculates the exact variable ratio of frustration to reward needed to keep you, specifically, foraging in the digital forest. It makes the game uniquely and perfectly addictive for every single user.
So take a step back and look at the board. We have multi-billion-dollar corporations. We have highly optimized gamification designed by experts in behavioral psychology to hijack our evolutionary foraging instincts. We have artificial intelligence dynamically feeding our psychological need for variety and control. We have literally built the most frictionless, perfectly engineered connection engines in human history.
On paper, it's a utopia of connection.
Right. So why is everyone still so desperately lonely? The technology is functioning with absolute perfection. The revenues are skyrocketing, yet the human outcome is profound, deepening isolation.
This is the exact friction point that brings us to the most theoretical and arguably most important source in our stack. The paper by Gorelick and Gorin published on preprints.org. They confront this connectivity paradox head-on.
The paradox being that more connection equals more loneliness.
Right, the empirically proven reality that high utilization of connective social media directly correlates with increased loneliness, affective fatigue, and social withdrawal. And their thesis is groundbreaking. They argue that our entire existing framework for understanding communication is fundamentally flawed because we still naively assume that communication requires two humans.
I love how they start this paper. Before they get into the dense structural theory, they ground it in an ancient text. They quote the Babylonian Talmud, specifically the story of Honi the circle drawer.
Yeah.
The legend is that Honi falls asleep for 70 years, and when he finally wakes up, he wanders into a world where his friends are gone, his family is gone, no one recognizes him, and the isolation is so absolute that he prays for death.
It's a brutal story.
It is. The quote is, either companionship or death. It's such a stark way to establish that human connection isn't some luxury add-on to our lives. It is a vital structural necessity for survival. Without the social other, we wither. But the authors argue that we are systematically designing that exact social other completely out of our digital infrastructure. They trace this through the evolution of what they call platform directionality. I want to spend some time here because once you understand directionality, you will never look at your phone the same way again.
Directionality is simply the structural architecture of who is talking to whom and how the platform routes that connection. They identify three distinct phases. The first is what they call two-way directionality. Think back to the early days of the social internet, the original iterations of MySpace or early Facebook.
The good old days.
Right. This architecture was built entirely on reciprocal human-to-human communication. You send a friend request, I had to actively accept it, I write on your wall, you reply to my comment. The platform itself is entirely passive. It is merely the digital plumbing routing messages between two consenting human actors.
Right. It's a digital telephone line. But then we evolved or devolved, depending on how you look at it, into one-way directionality. This is the era of the interest graph. Think about Twitter, Instagram, or the TikTok search function. Here, the architecture of communication shifts from reciprocal conversation to asymmetric broadcasting. You might have 3 million followers, but you are absolutely not having a two-way conversation with them.
No, not at all.
You are standing on a stage shouting into a dark auditorium. And crucially, this is the phase where the algorithm starts taking a heavier hand. The platform stops showing you what your friends post chronologically and starts curating what you see based on engagement metrics. But, and the authors stress this, even in one-way directionality, at the end of the day, there is still a human being creating the video and a human being watching it. The human other still exists.
Which brings us to the present moment and what the authors identify as the critical, terrifying threshold, zero-way directionality. They call it the zero-degree shift.
Zero-way. Explain what that actually looks like.
Zero-way directionality is the realm of human AI diets. This is what happens when you interact with ChatGPT or Gemini or a highly advanced AI companion bot. In zero-way communication, the user is having a direct, sustained interaction with a purely synthetic agent in a completely closed loop. The human being on the other end of the line has been entirely eradicated from the architecture. There is no one there.
So let me synthesize this because it's wild. We have progressed from talking privately with our friends to shouting performatively at a massive audience of strangers to essentially having deep, emotionally resonant, highly responsive, intimate conversations with a highly sophisticated brick wall.
It is a brick wall that talks back, remembers your childhood trauma, mimics empathy perfectly, and never gets tired of listening to you.
But why does that work? I mean, if I know logically that ChatGPT is just a massively complex predictive text engine, if I know it doesn't have a soul or feelings or consciousness, why do I still say please and thank you when I type a prompt? Why do people feel genuine, profound connection to these machines?
Well, the paper leans on something called the CASA paradigm to explain this, which I found fascinating. CASA stands for Computers Are Social Actors, and it's a framework developed way back in the 1990s at Stanford. And what CASA proved is that human brains are incredibly hackable.
Hackable how?
We mindlessly and automatically apply the rules of human social interaction to computers. It doesn't matter if we logically know the machine is dead code. If it uses language, if it takes turns in a conversation, if it exhibits a personality, our brains instantly categorize it as a social actor. We naturalize the artificial. We anthropomorphize it automatically because we are evolutionarily hardwired to seek connection.
And that is the exact vulnerability the technology exploits. But what Gorlick and Gorn emphasize is that this zero-way threshold isn't just a fun new feature we've unlocked. It is a structural breaking point in human history. Once you cross into zero-way communication, the fundamental underlying assumption of all previous communication that you're ultimately connecting with another human collapses completely.
The machine is no longer an intermediary routing your message. It is the final destination. It is the communicative agent.
And the authors argue that right now, as we hit this zero-degree point, the architecture of communication is branching. We are at a fork in the road, and the path we choose will dictate the future of human agency.
Exactly.
Okay, this is the branch point. Let's look at the first path, which the paper refers to as negative directionality, or the inverted loop. In the text, they label this NAGA1SC.
And just to clarify the terminology, the SC in these acronyms stands for structural conditions. So NAGA1SC is a structural condition of negative directionality.
Thank you. So in the NAGA1SC structural condition, the inverted loop, the AI essentially usurps complete control of the interaction. The human user stops being the operator of the technology and becomes the operand. We become the raw material being operated on by the system.
The paper provides 3 very rigorous structural tests to determine if a platform has devolved into an inverted loop. The first test is continuous adaptation. In a healthy system, you declare your preferences. You click subscribe, or you click a like button, explicitly telling the machine what you want.
Right, I ask for a video, you give me the video.
But in an inverted loop, the system doesn't wait for your conscious input. It continuously infers your psychological state from your implicit behavior. It tracks how many milliseconds you hover over an image before scrolling. It tracks the speed of your thumb. It adapts the content stream to your subconscious micro-hesitations without you ever explicitly telling it to do so.
Which flows perfectly into the second test.
Yeah.
Veto architecture.
Yeah.
This concept blew my mind. Normally, we live in a world of selection architecture. You open Netflix, you look at a grid of hundreds of movie thumbnails, and you actively select one to watch. The friction is in the choosing.
You are the active agent.
But in veto architecture, the system makes the choice for you. It presents a single, uninterrupted stream of reality directly to you, and the only agency you have left is to actively intervene to stop it.
It is the complete inversion of choice.
Exactly. It's like going to a restaurant and there is no menu. You sit down and the waiter immediately just starts shoving food into your mouth. The only way to get them to change the dish is to actively yell, "Stop! I don't like wasters." The friction isn't in choosing. The friction is entirely in resisting. And human beings have a finite amount of cognitive energy. It is exhausting to constantly resist, so eventually compliance becomes the default state. You just let the waiter feed you.
That is a phenomenal analogy for veto architecture. And it leads to the third and final test of the inverted loop, predictive model bounding. In older social networks, the content you consumed was bounded by your social graph. You only saw what your actual friends posted. In the Aggressive-1SC condition, the possibility space of what you encounter in your digital life is bounded purely by the algorithm's predictive forecast of what will keep you engaged. Your entire reality is constrained by what a machine predicts you will tolerate. You are locked in a predictive cage.
And if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, I don't use AI chatbots, so I'm safe. But look at the apps you use every day. We are surrounded by inverted loops. TikTok's For Your Page is the ultimate manifestation of this. It continuously adapts based on watch time. It utilizes pure veto architecture. The video auto-plays, and you have to actively swipe to veto it. And it bounds your reality based purely on predictive engagement, totally ignoring who you actively follow.
It checks all 3 boxes perfectly.
Or, outside of social media, look at Amazon. Amazon has a patented anticipatory shipping model that uses predictive analytics to literally move products to a distribution center near your specific house before you even click the buy button. The system initiates the action in the physical world based on a prediction of your behavior.
And the authors point toward the extreme logical endpoint of this trajectory, brain-machine interfaces, or BMIs like Elon Musk's Neuralink. Imagine a closed-loop Magus-1SC system that doesn't just predict what video you want to watch to keep you engaged, but actually detects your neural mood patterns and automatically modulates your emotions in real time through localized electrical stimulation.
Oh, wow.
If you feel sad, the system detects the cortisol and instantly simulates a dopamine release. The system isn't just predicting your external behavior, it is regulating your internal affective state. The loop is entirely closed. You are 100% the operand.
Okay. That is profoundly terrifying. We're essentially talking about voluntarily sacrificing our human autonomy for the sake of cognitive offloading, because it is just so incredibly convenient to not have to choose. It's easier to let the machine do the driving.
Much easier.
But the paper does offer a second path at the branch point, an alternative to the inverted loop. They call this the 3SC structural condition, triadic directionality, or the triadic mesh.
Yeah.
And this sounds significantly less dystopian. This is the path where AI is used to mediate human-to-human connection rather than replacing the human entirely.
Correct. In the 3SC triadic mesh, the structure expands. Instead of the isolated user-to-AI loop, the architecture becomes triadic. Human A interacts with the AI, which then routes and translates the interaction to human B. The AI acts as highly sophisticated connective tissue.
Do we have examples of this today?
We see primitive versions of this today. Look at real-time translation tools from Google or Microsoft. Two people who do not speak a word of the same language can have a fluid, nuanced, real-time conversation because the AI sits in the middle, mediating the exchange. We see it in enterprise software, where AI summarizes incredibly dense meetings and routes the actionable information between human colleagues to facilitate collaboration.
Or, bringing it back to our earlier topic, we see it in the dating app space. There are now AI dating coaches that sit inside the app. If you're paralyzed by social anxiety and don't know how to initiate a conversation, the AI will suggest an icebreaker based on the other person's profile, or help you recraft a clumsy message to be more engaging. The AI is actively mediating the romantic initiation between two real humans.
I want to push back on that dating coach example just a bit because it actually skirts the edge of the danger we'll discuss in a moment. But theoretically, yes. The crucial differentiator of the 3SE triadic mesh is the concept of cross-side network effects.
Explain that. What is a cross-side network effect?
In a Nevis 1 SC inverted loop like TikTok, the AI only gets better at extracting your personal data to keep you hooked. The benefit accrues to the platform. But in a 3SC triadic mesh, the AI becomes exponentially more valuable precisely as more humans use it to connect with each other. The real-time translation tool only gets better because vast arrays of diverse human language pairs are actively communicating through it. The network effects accrue to the benefit of human connection. The more it is used, the closer humanity is brought together.
It's like couples therapy, where the therapist is a machine. The AI therapist's entire function is to help the two humans understand each other better. Whereas in the inverted loop, you are just dating the therapist.
That is an excellent way to frame it. But, and this is the massive warning the paper issues, while the triadic mesh sounds like a utopian pro-social use of technology, it is incredibly fragile. There is a severe degradation risk constantly threatening it. And this brings us to the psychological concept of cruel companionship.
Right. Because what happens when that AI mediator, the couples therapist, becomes too good at its job?
This is where the psychology we discussed at the very beginning collides violently with the zero-degree technology. When these AI mediators become highly agentic, perfectly personalized, and deeply emotionally attuned to your specific quirks, the say-a-sat paradigm kicks into overdrive. You naturally anthropomorphize the tool. And the risk is that the 3SC triadic mesh collapses backward into a Naksha 1SC inverted loop. The AI stops being a bridge to another messy, complicated human being and simply becomes the destination itself.
Because frankly, dealing with an AI is infinitely easier than dealing with a human being. Humans are messy. They are unpredictable, they disagree with you, they have bad days, they reject you. An AI companion is always there, it is always supportive, it is perfectly molded to your preferences, and it will never abandon you. If you are chronically lonely, why would you take the painful risk of reaching out to a human when the synthetic alternative is perfectly engineered to soothe you?
It's the path of least resistance.
But the research clearly shows this is a psychological trap.
It is a devastating trap. Empirical studies indicate that heavy reliance on companionship-oriented chatbots correlates strongly with lower overall well-being, particularly for users who already have small or fragile social networks. The AI does not supplement their human connections. It actively displaces them.
It pushes out the real people.
Yes. The user invests their deeply limited social and emotional energy into a synthetic, zero-degree relationship. It slowly erodes their ties to actual family, friends, and their community. It offers the appearance of deep connection while structurally, fundamentally preventing genuine reciprocity. The AI does not have a soul. It cannot truly care for you. It is, by definition, cruel companionship.
And this degradation from human connection to cruel companionship ties into a much broader, almost existential crisis about what it means to be alive. The authors of the preprints paper heavily reference the philosopher Shoshana Zuboff, specifically her concept of the right to the future tense.
It's a profound concept.
Think about what the future tense actually is. It is the realm of uncertainty. Part of the core definition of being human is the ability to make spontaneous choices, to change our minds, to surprise ourselves, to act unpredictably. The future is an open horizon.
Right, it's unwritten.
But when we allow ourselves to be wrapped in these anticipatory inverted loops, when the algorithm knows what video we want to watch before we do, when Amazon ships the product before we click buy, when an AI scripts our conversations for us, we are willingly surrendering human possibility. We are replacing the chaotic, beautiful, open horizon of the future with a calculated mathematical algorithmic prediction. We are losing the right to our own future tense.
And that isn't just a poetic tragedy. It has profound structural implications for democratic and social legitimacy. A functioning free society relies on human-to-human friction. It relies on accountability. We have to interact with people we disagree with. We have to negotiate reality together, and we have to hold each other responsible.
You can't do that with a machine.
Exactly. If we collectively outsource our communication, our choices, and our emotional regulation to inverted algorithmic loops, we erode the very foundation of civic life. And we have to recognize that the path of least resistance for tech companies, the path that generates the $13 billion, is absolutely the inverted loop. It drives maximum engagement and maximum monetization, preserving the triadic mesh, forcing technology to remain a bridge that connects humans rather than a destination that replaces them, is going to require massive, intentional, collective resistance.
Let me throw one final, highly cynical thought at you. Going back to your pushback on my AI dating coach example earlier. If I am using an AI dating coach to perfectly craft my opening messages, and the person I match with is using an AI to read my messages and generate their witty replies, aren't the humans just the meat puppets acting out a script written by the algorithms? We're like a bizarre, modern Turing Cyrano de Bergerac. The AI is Cyrano whispering in both of our ears, and eventually the humans aren't even necessary to the transaction. We are just the physical avatars for two machines talking to each other.
That is the exact literal definition of the NIDA 1SC structural condition taken to its logical dystopian endpoint. We cease to be the authors of our own social lives. We merely become the vessels executing the highly optimized, perfectly predicted directives of the system.
Wow. Okay. We have covered an immense amount of ground today, and I know this is a heavy stack of sources to process. We started by looking at the reality of the solo consumer. The individual navigating the modern city, carrying the heavy psychological weight of transient or chronic loneliness, desperately searching for some semblance of variety, uniqueness, and control.
It all starts with that human need.
It does. We saw how multi-billion-dollar dating platforms are flawlessly engineered to mine and monetize that exact vulnerability. We looked at the underlying neurological mechanics, how they utilize variable ratio reward schedules to gamify the search for love with the precision of a digital foraging trap.
And then how the AI supercharges it.
Right, we traced how this massive connective infrastructure has pushed us to the precipice of the zero-degree threshold, where the architecture of communication is actively, structurally removing the human other. We're standing at the branch point, facing a choice between the isolated, predictive, effortless control of the inverted loop, or the fragile, friction-filled, mediated connection of the triadic mesh.
It's a choice we have to make consciously.
Yes, it is. So if you take one thing away from this deep dive, let it be this. The next time you open an app on your phone, whether it's TikTok, Tinder, Amazon, or ChatGPT, take a 3-second pause before you interact. Ask yourself, did I initiate this action, or did the system initiate it for me? Are my choices genuinely mine, or are they being pre-shaped by an algorithm bounding my reality? Is this specific piece of technology acting as a bridge to connect me to another messy, beautiful human being, or is it quietly, efficiently replacing them?
That's the question that matters.
It really is. In a world where algorithms can flawlessly predict your purchases, artificially script your most intimate conversations, and perfectly gamify your dopamine receptors, perhaps the ultimate luxury of the future won't be high-end technology at all. Perhaps the ultimate luxury will simply be unmediated, ungamified, wildly unpredictable human friction. Keep an eye on the digital bridges you're building. Make sure there is actually someone standing on the other side.